I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown it in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here tonight on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Big victory for CWA members across West Virginia and Virginia as Frontier agreed to their job security demands. And look, it's a step forward. I'm thrilled to see that labor is stepping up, stepping forward, and people are in the streets. I mean, this is stuff that we've been calling for a very long time. This idea of solidarity, class consciousness, getting out there and putting up the fight. I mean, right now there's that moment where backs are against the wall. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Also, Scott Dworkin's going to be here, share some of his thoughts on the latest episode of As the Trump Turns. Evidently, maybe John Kelly next on the fire list. Just very, very bizarre kind of week. But hey, at least we're going to have a guy in charge of the VA who thinks that with good genes and eating right, you could live to be 200 years old. So that's fun. Head of the VA. Maybe, not dropping bombs on each other. We could live longer. All of that. Also in the second hour, we're going to talk a little bit about the census question, which I've been getting a lot of email on. And this is one of those things that I keep coming back to. The right wing of this country does a masterful job of division. They do an outstanding job of divide and conquer, a masterful job of throwing their base red meat. And this is one of those red meat questions. It's all this is. There's nothing positive in this, in my view, outside of the hope that the faithful on the fringe of the right get all frothy in the panties. This is what this is about. It's not about good governance. It's not about finding out, how many undocumented people are in the country. We already know that. It's about, riling up the base, and it's about scaring people underground. And mission accomplished. I think even if the question doesn't get on the census, which is just a couple of days away, where everything has to be kind of finalized, even if it doesn't get on there, it's already done enough to scare people. So they're also going to talk a little bit about education, the potential of an Oklahoma walkout next week. Lots and lots of fun, lots and lots of stuff to get to. But before we get to all of that, I got to be honest. I spent a little time, looking back at some of the old Trump tweets and some of the. Is this guy on every side of every issue at every moment? I mean, it's really the bizarrest thing. And I spent a little time I had like an hour to waste, so I was just reading through the insanity and reading through the craziness that we've seen over the years out of him. And I got to be honest, this is not normal. I know I have a listener who constantly reminds me that this isn't normal, but this isn't normal. What we're seeing coming out of the White House, not normal. And while I look at everything that's going on, all of this chaos all around. I can only come back to evil genius. I mean, he has figured out how to manipulate our entire system to pit us against one another in a way that, you know, people that I've known for a while who I thought were sane and rational, I look at it in a different way now. And I guess I'm concerned about the day after tomorrow. I'm concerned about the future. I'm concerned about, you know, all of this stuff that's meant just to score Twitter points. All of this stuff that's meant to just, you know, throw division out there as a distraction. And look, our media, they're lapdogs. They're going to run to the shiny thing. They're going to run to the you know, the laser pointer or the string like a kitten, while all of this other stuff is going on. And, you know, I look at the fighting with Amazon. You know, who's getting rich off of this? I mean, for me, it's follow the money. While he's bickering with Amazon and the stocks are all over the place, who's making tons of money off of this? And I'm hoping that there's a moment where we kind of all come back around and find some common space. It's just, wow. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I got lots to get to tonight, lots of stuff I want to get into. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, Ed Mooney from CWA District 213 is going to be here to share some of his thoughts on the CWA win with Frontier. Quick break, right back.
10% of the people own 90% of the wealth. Where do you fit in? Take a look at yourself. 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth.
Where smart policy and sound investment matters. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day the U.S. Supreme Court issued its ruling on the case West Coast Hotel versus Parrish. The ruling upheld a progressive-era Washington state law that established minimum wages for women. An example of protective legislation, it intended to guard health, safety, and morals of women workers. Elsie Parrish had been a chambermaid at the Cascadian Hotel in Wenatchee, Washington until 1935. She sued and won at the state level after she was paid far below the state's minimum wage. The parent company, West Coast Hotel, appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. They argued the progressive-era law violated the constitutional right of individuals to freely contract with one another. This interpretation was common during the court's Lochner era. The 1905 Lochner v. New York ruling against maximum hours for bakers ushered in a period of anti-labor Supreme Court rulings. Parrish is considered the landmark case that brought an end to that era. The court argued that the Constitution does not speak of freedom of contract and added, quote, the exploitation of a class of workers who are in an unequal position with respect to bargaining power is not only detrimental to their health and well-being, but casts a direct burden for their support upon the community. What these workers lose in wages, the taxpayers are called upon to pay. The case is also considered instrumental in the switch in time to save 9. It was a reference to Justice Owen Roberts' surprising shift in favor of Parrish. This occurred just as President Roosevelt finalized plans to increase the number of Supreme Court justices to 15. Though Parrish did not overturn Lochner, it did mark a period of pro-labor rulings. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
We need to stand united, for undivided we shall never fall. Remember all, we need to trust in and then forever call our brothers and our sisters. And are you and I will win. You and I both know that we can rely on it. The time is prime, planets align, ain't no mistaking. For union resurrection, the anger has awakened. The sleeping giant, come on now we can do it. We need to revive, re-amp, and re-up the labor movement. Anything in life worth having.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, ricksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So on Monday, I saw the headline, the strike is over there in West Virginia and in Virginia and Frontier as the Communication Workers of America, on the other side of this, appear victorious and going back to work. And look, at the end of this, I've been saying for a while, what we need more of this. We need people who are going to stand up, hit the streets, fold the arms, march the feet in the streets, and all of that stuff. And here to talk about the big victory, I've asked Ed Mooney to come talk with us. He's the Vice President of CWA District 2-13. Ed, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
So, big victory, yes?
Yeah, it's a big victory. We achieved what we set out to achieve, which was job security for all the members in the bargaining unit. And, we're happy that it's resolved and our members are back to work. And obviously going on strike is never easy, but sometimes it's necessary. And in this case, we believe we had the right issue and we had the support for the issue, and it was successful.
No, I mean, the job security issue, I think, is something that a lot of workers you talk to, something very important. And as I remember, in your case, you had decent wages, good conditions, good benefits. But if you don't have any security in the job, they can do away with it tomorrow. What's the point of having the others?
Right. And, and unfortunately for us, or fortunately, depending on which way you look at it, the company had showed their hand prior to the contract expiring with the threat of a layoff to all those 200 employees that were exposed. So, with them doing that, we took the issue to the membership. We eventually did get the company to rescind it prior to the expiration of the contract, but even in their rescinding it, they stated that if they had to do it again, they would use the contract language. So it became clear to us that was the right issue, and it was successful because the public also was on our side because they realized the company isn't living up to the commitments that they made to the state to build out the network. So those two things went hand in hand. We had tremendous community support for the workers across West Virginia and Virginia.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me because you talk to a lot of people, especially some of these cable providers who are just exploding, and the service is suffering. And in my view, it comes down to the union saying, "Hey, look, we want to make sure that you keep your business, so we keep our jobs." And this was a big part of that issue, as I understand.
Yeah, I mean, when we're suffering losses of membership due to the company saying they're losing customers, well, if you're not deploying a high-quality network, then you are going to lose customers. And as a result, we lose jobs. So, the two go hand in hand. And in a situation like this, the telecommunications companies, whether it's cable, television, whatever, they have more of an obligation to the public because they're getting access to a specific area. And they are getting access to every one of those customers in that area. And, where they're deploying it in certain areas and not in others, we have the same case here in Pennsylvania where you have Verizon that deploys a fiber network to, the densely populated sections of the state. But in rural Pennsylvania, they're still running off of copper networks. And we're trying to get them to work through the process of investing there. So, it's not unique to West Virginia. It certainly happens a lot, but that's why we need to keep the government oversight over these issues and hold these companies accountable when we give them access to this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you see all of this talk of deregulation, and look, it's all fine, well, and good, as you point out, if you're in a highly populated area. But you look at places where I live, out in central Pennsylvania, and the reality is internet service, especially in my areas, is pathetic. I mean, it's right. One of those things where they just haven't invested because they don't have to.
And the shame of it is, we have all been paying for years into what's known as a universal service fund, which is supposed to be used for exactly that, so that we have areas in the densely populated areas. I'm from Philadelphia. So if every person in Philadelphia is paying that monthly fee into that universal service fund, that is what's supposed to enhance the company's ability to build out there. So they either haven't done the right thing with that, or their priorities are misplaced, as in most cases.
No, I mean, I look at this, and at the end of it, what you guys are doing, I think, is incredibly important, not just from the workers' standpoint of making sure you get decent wages, hours, conditions, and job security, but also from the consumer standpoint. Because, look, it's my view the corporation doesn't care about the consumer. Somebody should.
Right. Well, and we try to hold them accountable, because obviously if we're not building out the product, then in the end we're going to lose our jobs. And so we use whatever means necessary. If we can't convince the company, first we try obviously to work with the employer when the employer gets down to it. And unfortunately, this is a flaw in the labor law in this country. As labor unions, we have the right to negotiate wages, benefits, and working conditions. We have no right to tell them where to allocate their capital. So we need to use other levers in the community, whether it's the service commissions or the public pressure, to get them to invest capital in these areas.
Now you look at this strike, and as I had talked to some members and people about this, a lot of people thought it should have been unnecessary, that this should not have been something that caused this kind of disruption, that it was the company was just pushing this in a way that it was never going to stand. And it was almost like, from what people have told me, that they were kind of pushed you guys into this.
I don't think they pushed us into it. We tried to lay it out for them. This was a unique situation. Frontier acquired a large part of the state of West Virginia from Verizon. When they acquired that large property, they had two smaller properties of CWA members still in the state, already owned them, and were under separate and different contracts. I wasn't there in 2010 when it was acquired. I would have pushed then for them to be combined into one collective bargaining agreement. Unfortunately, I arrived in 2011, and from 2011 till now, we set that process in motion of combining them into one. In 2016, they were put into the one contract. However, the employment security was the one thing that the company refused to give at that time, and I didn't have a viable option at that time, so we took the next step, which was to put them in there, and then in this case, we had the opportunity to accomplish the employment security for all of them. And I'm sorry that we had to go through that. I'm sorry the customers had to go through that. We certainly articulated those issues and why we were doing it in this circumstance. This was not something that would happen nationwide, and for whatever reason, the company didn't come around to subscribe to our theory until 3 weeks into the strike. But we're happy it's over. Thrilled for those members in the state. All they want to do is get back to work and service the customers and service their communities. That's what we're programmed to do, and that's what they're back doing now. So we're thrilled.
Yeah, good stuff. Now, you guys have been involved in a number of very successful strikes here recently, a number of job actions recently that I've been seeing more and more. Are you encouraged by the number of people who appear to be organizing and taking these kind of actions to say, enough's enough already?
I don't know if I'm encouraged or if I continue to be the one involved in it, but I think in working in the negotiation process, this is now the fourth strike I've been involved in since 2011, and there comes a point in time where you have to make sure your membership is willing to do it, and also that the issues that you're fighting for are the appropriate issues. I think in some cases people. If you don't have the right issue, it can be problematic. But we try to, in the CWA, to identify the issue, as the appropriate issues, and that's what we're fighting for. So I would not encourage more people to do it. Certainly, if other bargaining units get to the point and they feel as though they need to do it, and they feel the same way that the issues are the correct issues, and you can get the public on your side, and obviously the rest of the labor movement will be there with you, and we can succeed, then I think we certainly do need more people to take a stand. Of the ones we have in a union, those people can take a stand. What we really need are for those people who are not in union-represented jobs right now to get into a union, to join a union. There's a tremendous state senator in the state of West Virginia named Richard Ojeda, who's running for Congress in the 3rd District in West Virginia, who was a staunch supporter of the teachers in West Virginia and of ours and of labor unions, period, where he has a spiel where he says if you are not in a labor union, you need to get in one. And if you don't have access to collective bargaining in your workplace because there is no union, then organize one. And that's what we're lacking. If more people were getting access to collective bargaining, you would see more and more people not having to go on strike, but advancing and gaining a greater share of the revenue or the wealth that they're generating.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I bring it up is because you see in West Virginia, since you brought it up with the teachers, we're seeing in Oklahoma, there's the potential of a walkout on Monday. You're seeing in places like Arizona and Kentucky this kind of groundswell of organizing that is going on that I keep saying, eventually we pull all of this back into the labor movement and lead not just for rights on the job and rights in public, but also for a better future, for a better working class, better opportunities.
Right, and also you see a key component in that teacher strike in West Virginia were the 55 county superintendents of the school districts who continuously closed those schools to allow those teachers to do what they were doing.
Yeah.
Right? They're aware they don't have the right to strike there. So by those superintendents closing the schools and giving them the right to be at the Capitol, to be in those legislative arenas for those consecutive number of days, those individuals help that. And in Oklahoma and Kentucky and the rest of them, I hope that they have people in those positions that are just as supportive, because that's a key component. If they value the teachers who perform the work every day for those students, as they did in West Virginia, then they can have a similar outcome. But that should, in my opinion, that shouldn't be overlooked. Obviously, I would defer to the two teachers' organizations there. But as an outsider looking in, I applaud the 55 superintendents who continuously closed those schools so that those teachers could do what they were doing.
Yeah, good stuff. Again, congratulations to you and your members. Congratulations on a victory. Hard fought, but well deserved. Good on you guys.
Yep. And thank you very much. I appreciate your time as always.
Ed, I appreciate it so much. Ed Mooney, Vice President there of CWA 2-13. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, Scott Dworkin's going to be here, share some of his thoughts on what's going on in the town of D.C. Stick around. Right back after this.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1948. That was the day that the labor movement came literally to the doorstep of Wall Street. The United Financial Employees Union went out on strike. The union was started in 1941 by Merritt David Keefe, a page who had worked on the stock exchange trading floor. Keefe had grown up too poor to finish high school. He had gone to Wall Street in the hope of finding wealth and financial security. Instead, he found long hours and low-paying work. He decided the only way to change things was to form a union. By 1946, the union had grown to 5,000 members. Keefe described their platform, calling for a general overall minimum increase of 25% in the salaries of Wall Street employees, job security, benefits of a pension fund, and, in addition, a bonus computed on the volume of trading. Negotiations drug on. Finally, 1,100 union members walked out on strike against both the New York Stock Exchange and the New York Curb Exchange. 500 members of the Seafarers Union supported the exchange workers' cause. The first day of the strike was peaceful, but the next morning, the police told the strikers they could not picket the main entrance of the stock exchange. One 19-year-old woman refused to go across the street. The police reacted by grabbing her and arresting her. Outraged, the picketers rushed to her aid. Some attempted to lie down in the entrance to block the exchange. The police wielded batons, hospitalizing 2 strikers and arresting more than 40. Sadly, the strike ended in defeat in April, as 100 workers lost their jobs because of their involvement. The workers had lost the Battle of Wall Street, the first and only strike at the exchange. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
Rebels always
No ball or chain, no prison shall keep where the rebels are the sacred heart. I said no ball or chain, no prison shall keep where the rebels are the sacred heart.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So again, I've seen all of these stories about Mueller talking with different people about stuff that happened at the convention in Cleveland. Evidently, Sessions had a meeting with a Russian spy. All of the changes in the platform that the Republicans did to be a little softer on Russia. And you go, this is not new. We've been talking about this for well over a year now, and it's this breathless stuff. Yeah, I'm really hoping Mueller gets to the bottom of that. But please stop with the breathless stories that this is new. It's not. It's stuff we've already known, stuff we've been talking about for a long time. The problem, I think, is that some people were just brushing it aside. Maybe for some it is new. Anyway, here to share some of his thoughts on, well, as the Trump turns, our good friend Scott Dworkin, co-founder of the Democratic Coalition. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Can you hear me, Rick? Are we good?
You're right there, man. How are we today?
Hey, I'm great. We fixed all audio. We're here in a soundproof studio, and I'm looking forward to the new league of technology and using it to our advantage.
There you go. So what do you think of this? I mean, I've been seeing all of these stories that Mueller was flipping gates to get to the collusion, at the convention and all of this stuff. This is not new, is it?
No. I mean, a lot of these people have already flipped. Now, keep in mind, at this point, it doesn't work. It doesn't work this way. One of the ways that it does not work is it doesn't work backwards, where they don't say, "Hey, I've got some stuff, and I want to make a deal." They present everything, and then Mueller decides whether or not he wants to make a deal. And so that makes it clear that Mueller already has everything. Mueller has everything that they have, like Flynn, Gates, Papadopoulos. And we're talking about private conversations directly with Russian intelligence assets, people that are directly related, financially benefited, and have money trails back. And all of them met with senior officials that are directly linked to Putin. And so I think what we're gonna find is they're gonna start to skew things away from whether or not they colluded or conspired against the United States of America, and they're gonna start to say it's okay that we did.
No, I mean, wasn't that the first line of argument when the idea that there was some coordination between the Russians? I mean, the first words out of most right wingers' mouth is, well, so what? Everyone does it. Everyone does it, Scott.
I've worked on probably close to 1,000 campaigns in all 50 states and DC, and I have never worked with a foreign government or anybody related with one or an embassy of sorts for any campaign ever. And I've worked, from president on down, Congress, state house, state senate, governor's races, and never, not once. And because there's no reason to. There, especially on a presidential campaign, you would never, for example, you would never set up ambassadors to meet with the potential president to be. He's a candidate. They need to focus on Americans. They need to focus on Americans and meet with Americans. They need to meet with labor leader unions, and they also need to focus on party leaders and things like that. It was clear that they were kind of parsed with support because of Trump's divisiveness, and so they were desperate for anything. And just so happens is a majority of Trump's friends in real life are Russians.
And, I've been saying that for a while, that this is a situation where the oligarchy in both countries have been in bed together since the fall of the wall. So it's not surprising to me that they would have these close ties. But again, for me, looking as, just an outsider going, why would you allow just the appearance of having the Russians involved in your campaign at all, just because of the bad messaging?
Right. And Carter Page was just on Chris Hayes' show, and he kind of, I guess he wrote a memo that has to do with whether or not there was an outcome from his meeting that we found with the Deputy Prime Minister of Russia during the campaign. So he literally is meeting with the Deputy Prime Minister of Russia during the campaign while in Russia and a representative of the Trump campaign. That meeting, which was just I bumped into him, now has turned into we talked about sanctions basically, and how he was going to support the Trump campaign. And that is the Russian government. So you've got that. You have Gates and Manafort working with a former Russian intelligence, so a Russian spy. You have, again, Carter Page, who had worked with a Russian spy before. You have Papadopoulos, who worked with a Russian spy, and multiple different agents in Greece. These are all, everybody on that campaign squad seems to be corrupt. And that's why they worked for free, so they could say, oh, I was a volunteer. Yeah, because they're busy making billion-dollar oil deals overseas where they can get kickbacks. One of the key things that people forget is there was a lawsuit that was filed by the former prime minister of Ukraine that against Manafort and a former Trump employee that was the right-hand man for Donald Trump's father. And what they did is they sued him for taking oil kickbacks from Russian-Ukraine oil deals. And so that's Manafort and another person that will add. You're going to see dozens of more people come out in regards to Russians that are linked with Trump. The Guardian just came out with something right now that involves not just the Agarovs, but his deals in Latvia. Everything involved Russians, every single deal out there in the former Soviet Union. So you're going to start to see this all pieced together, and it's going to end up being a little absurd as to how extensive his business dealings are with Russians.
No, I mean, again, as you've said, I mean, it's going to be absurd. But this is how they get you. I get. I've talked to somebody who was a former CIA agent, and it's his view that, look, Trump was gotten, didn't even know he was gotten, and the kid he was gotten didn't even know it. Same thing with Kushner. They are bought, paid for, and they don't even know it, and that's the scarier part. Because, the fact that you're being manipulated and don't even know it, to me, that's the scary thing in this.
Yeah, I think that that's a cop-out for them, and I don't believe it for 1 second that they didn't know what they were doing was wrong. I think they absolutely know it. I've worked with billionaires before in regards to their projects, and I know exactly how they operate. Here's something, for example. As a businessman, how can you honestly say as a billionaire that you don't have a track record of every single meeting that you've ever done? And then not only that, you have to do follow-up from that. You have to then, get contracts arranged. Like, it's not as simple as just a meeting and nothing happened from it, and I don't really know who I met with. That's total BS. All of that is the play dumb theory. And I think that they're learning that lying by omission is still something that Mueller will charge them with. So all of that will backfire, because there's no way that they can survive this. Right now, it's survival of the fittest. There's not going to be any pardons given. It seems like that's out the window for now. And it doesn't look like he can actually fire Mueller. The bills have come together. They even put together a joint statement. A Republican Senator, Tom Tillis from North Carolina, and a Democratic Senator, Coons, put together a joint statement that said, if you're gonna, don't do it. Don't fire Mueller. Don't even try. We have a bill all set, and they are ready to move on that. I don't know why. Well, we all know why they're waiting, because they want him to be able to dangle it over our heads. So it's another thing we fight about. Again, that's another rallying cry. I don't think that they know exactly what they're doing. And even past that, as we fight with the Fox News pundits who are just, propaganda mouthpieces for Trump, like Laura Ingraham, as you'll see, Fire Ingraham is now trending number 3 on Twitter. That's hard work of people from the resistance that have said, I don't want to take this anymore. You attacked a Parkland, shooting survivor. He's 17 years old. He's allowed to complain about the colleges but you're going to attack him for that and then give a fake apology when 8 of your biggest sponsors leave because of it. So I'm really proud of the direction this country's going in, because activism is now cool. Yeah. And maybe that'll make gerrymandering, pushing against that's cool now too. Who knows what's next?
Yeah, I'm with you. Maybe we'll fight for better wages, hours, and conditions along with it. But the thing that gets me is, you look at the right wing, and Are you surprised that they're attacking a high school student survivor of a mass shooting? No. These are people who applauded when Trump attacked a Gold Star family. These are people who applauded when Trump attacked a disabled person. These are people who applauded when Trump said, throw the guy out in the cold and don't give him his coat. I mean, all of the things that these people have pushed and applauded. I mean, come on. There's no surprises here.
No, I mean, Roy Moore, known pedophile. I mean, it gets further. They had a guy that was their Oklahoma chair that got convicted of child sex trafficking. Like, it's obscene. There's so many scandals that they keep on popping them out. It is hard to keep up. The great news is there are a lot of patriots in this country, Republicans and Democrats, that are finally coming together. Republicans took a complete turn this week, as you may have seen, in regards to Russia, and they no longer are saying that this is a hoax. They're no longer saying that it's not necessary. There's still like 3 or 4 Republicans saying that the investigation should end. Look at these FBI texts and these emails. Like, that's all nonsense. When this comes down to it, you're going to see that people have died because of this scandal, that people were murdered because of this scandal, that people have been executed, ordered to be killed by people. One of the pieces of evidence that we've seen is Manafort's daughter, through text messages that were leaked, said that it was blood money and he's ordered murders before. These are mobsters. That's what they are, and they're doing it right in front of our faces. And luckily, again, we have people like you and Mueller and other folks that are digging into the truth, because without that, I don't know where we'd be.
I'm with you. Let me ask you, when are we expecting the next round of indictments? Are you hearing anything that, maybe who's next, what's next, any word?
Yeah, so one of 2 things looks to be next. It looks like the most logical move would be to indict any of the Russian government actors directly, whether it's, members of Putin's government. I don't think it would be Putin himself. Unless it's just kind of like a show, it was Putin for sure. We're going to indict him. I mean, I don't know if that would actually work out that way. I don't think so. And then the other part, which is the exciting part, are the Trump campaign members that colluded with Russia. And I think that is coming soon. That will involve some new names that we haven't heard before and some names that may surprise you. I'm looking at people like Sean Hannity. I'm also looking at Jared Kushner, Don Jr., Roger Stone. Sam is another person who looks like he may be indicted. I mean, a lot of these people cross the lines. I also have heard that there's a possibility that Assange could be indicted, and different people who were involved with WikiLeaks, anybody who was involved with Guccifer 2.0. But I see that connection, that bridge, because that's really all that's left. It's a gigantic case. There's so many moving parts, and there's so many different crimes that have been committed. But that pathway is kind of clear now for Mueller. So I think he's going to present his case. I mean, even if he just does one piece of paper, one court filing, that's getting international news immediately now. And it's being taken very seriously because people realize we're done with the catchphrases. We're done with, this kind of hyperbole and made up stuff, fake news. People are like, people are getting hurt. You're letting people do a gas attack in one of our biggest allies. So, again, there are no props for Trump on what's happened this week in regards to attacks, on Russia or pushing them out. He's done the most weak, pathetic response that you could possibly do. And one of the key things people always forget about is looks matter and what you say matters. And this is politics. And when you don't say anything and you don't look mean, and you're not upset, that says something. And Putin does use that in all of his news organizations as, me and Trump are still getting along. We're still buddy. We're still chummy. Or I'm taking him to the cleaners. I'm eating his lunch. Like, that sort of messaging is happening. So I would expect Mueller to very shortly. I wouldn't be surprised if he dropped something tomorrow. I wouldn't be shocked, but I would doubt it just because of the long weekend and how court schedules work. But with this, I wouldn't be surprised if he did something tomorrow. Now with indictments, I'd look to later in the next week.
It'll be interesting to watch that. Let me back up a little bit, because we're seeing a lot about Cambridge Analytics. We're seeing a lot about the Mercer money. We're seeing all of these ties, and I wanted to get your thoughts, because I've been having conversations with people who say, you know what, Scott, no one changed my vote. I knew who I was voting for, and I'm sure you've heard this 1,000 times. Walk through a little bit your thoughts on how that plays out.
Sure. So there's a bunch of different ads that tens of thousands, it seems, that they came up with, and what they were trying to do was to brainwash people, not to cutter for they're not going for their vote. They were actually trying to change your mind, to make you hate Hillary Clinton and embrace Donald Trump.
Right, but Scott, here's the thing. The people that I talked to already hated Hillary. Right. They were the fives in my view. There was no changing their minds. They were already out there. So if you couldn't have changed their minds, whose minds did you change?
They go towards the middle. They go towards those swing voters, and they go towards where it hurts. Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, but they targeted all 50 states because, again, it was so cheap to run these ads. People don't know. They take for granted what they see online, and yes, maybe there's going to be those people, I'm voting Dem, I'm voting Republican, but it's that middle that they focused on, and it worked with a lot of people. But I don't think, again, there's not going to be proof as to, oh, this changed that vote or that changed that vote, but there will be ways that they're able to track that, because of this hack, this amount of people were not able to, they were not allowed to vote because Russia hacked this database. They were not able to vote because they deleted from the voter roll registration, because they had a non-matching birth date, and very small things like that, where they were not allowed to vote or their vote didn't count. I think that kind of stuff will add up. At the same time, the 60 different people that are getting kicked out of this country are Russian spies. Okay, they work for Russian intelligence, and they were a front for as diplomats. So where were they on election day? And I'm very serious about that. And I mean, I can't tell you how many people rolled their eyes at me a year and a half ago, but where were they on election day? Were they volunteering at the polls? They have access to the voting machines? If you're a spy, if your entire life is built around supporting Russia and destroying America, how far are you willing to go? Will you take a USB drive that has Wi-Fi that can put some kind of worm into the voting machine? I mean, that's how far it's gone, as to Congress basically saying, we don't want Wi-Fi on any of our voting machines ever again. We want paper ballots and everything, because people don't know. Republicans also know they're next.
No, of course. I mean, you live by the sword, die by the sword. So are you saying that this might be a cover? What we're seeing with Cambridge Analytica and Facebook is a cover for the real crime of maybe they actually did hack into these voting machines, and maybe they actually did change some of the votes?
I've seen those voting machines, face to face, and dealt with them for years, and I can tell you, the simplest things can screw up an entire election. When I worked in Florida in 2006, they had something called undervotes, where in the screen, when you voted for, I think it was Davis and Nelson for Senate and governor, and then Christine Jennings, who I was working for, and when you went to the review screen, Christine Jennings was not on the review screen. It was just an empty vote. And so you had to go back there and fill it in. There's small things like that can, and I think it was thousands of votes that we lost in our district, and they, lost a couple voting machines too. So it's those small things that chip away, and it really doesn't take much to do that. I absolutely believe that it takes one person to change a voting machine's numbers. If you've been here for years and you've been working as a diplomat or a spy, I don't know how far they're willing to go, but I'm pretty sure that they were willing to go pretty far to make sure that Hillary was not president. And the most logical thing, one of the most easy things to do, is to hack into a computer that is the basis for the vote totals. I don't see why that would be absurd, or, I think that everything needs to be audited in every single state, because we don't know what happened. These are spies. Their entire life is to destroy America or hurt us, and then help them, because there's no other outcome there. So I don't know. I don't know where that's going to go. But it's all those little things, because it really is very simple to stop someone from voting. You can get to the line, but if your vote doesn't matter when you file it, if your vote doesn't actually count, that's all they need. They don't need to just delete they can just make it so you can't vote. So there's a lot of different ways that they can prevent you from voting overall, and I'm sure that there's going to be different ways where it's explicitly shown that votes were lost because of Russians.
No, and look, I said for a while that we shouldn't worry so much about the Russians as the Republicans that I worry about, because they've done everything that they can do to put barriers in the way of people being able to vote. They've moved around voting machines. They've blocked access, caging. You could go down the list of all, and soon just cross-check, all of this stuff to limit voting. And now what you're saying is, you've got these spies who maybe they're tinkering around the edges to make sure that people can't vote as well. It just seems like there's all of this coordination where you've got the Republicans and you've got the Russians who seem to be in bed together.
Yeah, and it's we found that it's been over $8 million was given to Republican super PACs, McConnell, Rubio, McCain, Graham, and this guy is a Russian oil billionaire that's linked to the dossier. And there's little things like that all start to add up as, okay, well, they wouldn't have that money. They wouldn't have an operational super PAC without that money. So they're dependent on it and they want more. So what are they willing to do for that? And you just have to look at that. And those are the questions we never should have to ask, And so that's why we started our super PAC in the first place, the Democratic Coalition, because super PACs should not exist. So we figure if we start our super PAC with this, they're going to want to destroy super PACs forever. It really is disgusting, because people do move based on money. And if you limit the money that's involved in the election, they focus more on the voter, and they focus on the face-to-face and what's actually going to happen for the district. If you can't be bought, then it's not going to sway votes with money. And so it really is, it's as simple as a guy, I've been fundraising since 2005, and I can tell you that I've personally have had to make members of Congress sit down and make phone calls for 18 hours a day for fundraising, right? So it was a focus for a while for them to sit down, make phone calls, and not just for money, but maybe for support, endorsements, but it all links back to that money, because they need it to run. So we need to figure out some way where, there's a limit to what a person's own money can go into the race, so that we don't have just a bunch of self-funding billionaires and other people can run. We need to even the playing field for the average guy.
Yeah, I've always been a supporter of publicly financed elections. Having calculus, $5 vote, $5 contributions from people with matching and something like that. There's got to be a way to move forward without having, politics being the new polo of the rich.
Right. And it's, in the long run, I think that, when Democrats are able to take the helm, hopefully in the fall here, I think that some of the things will change, because people will be sick of it, the games and the deceit. There's so much money floating around. You can even see the different front and shell companies. Talking about Cambridge Analytica, that essentially is a shell company, one of many. They open different companies in different countries. And so from our investigations and what we're talking with different people about is the fact that Cambridge Analytica was not the only company, that SEL Group, that parent company with Nix, that was operating in the United States. And you're the first person I told that. Well, hi everybody. But that's the deal. They have other operations that were here. It wasn't just Cambridge Analytica.
Right. But what do you say to that, Scott, that, everyone does that. Everyone does. Obama did it. Obama did exactly what Trump did with Cambridge Analytica. No,
he didn't. It's not the same. That's like, it's apples and oranges. It's a spoiled orange and a good apple. What Obama did is they had people opt in to a network. They knew that their data was being shared. That was being preserved at a constant. We would even, in different data for different members of Congress and whatnot, we'd put out spoilers with, you're allowed to put in, like, this guy gave $250 to see if other people are soliciting your lists. even just to save their information from research, we'd be able to put in little different pockets where they'd call me instead, and I'd be like, you're caught, like stop calling through our list. Like there's different ways that you can protect people from being attacked like that. But when it's just a smorgasbord of like, here's everything and take your pick and, you know, it's going to be abused. And I think that this is kind of like the reckoning of the internet has caught up to us as to it affects our real life. People are realizing that. Yeah, it's not just a virtual world. It affects everything you do. Ask that to every single person that I've helped get fired across the country who have called Obama, you know, slurs and things like that. Everything you do online can come back and haunt you in the real life. And at the same time, it really is. It's gonna get worse before it gets better, I think, because I can already see tonight that the trolls are out to hunt. But everybody is aware of it now. We didn't know before. And I didn't even know what we were doing in 2017 when I saw, for example, like different hashtags trending from Russia and some of their Kremlin-linked accounts, and same thing with Republican leaders. And I'm like, I don't understand why they're pushing this, and they're also helping us. And it was just to help Trump. And so we would have to fight back in different ways to say, this is a sham, don't listen to it. But again, knowledge is power, and finally we have the knowledge. It's sad that our government is not the ones guiding it, though. It's individual groups, you know, that are fighting back, not the government. And it's all a farce right now. Like, they've done nothing that I've seen. There's no study, there's no analysis. All we've got right now is Mueller.
Now, let me ask you last line of question on this, though, because, you know, pretty much all through my childhood, you know, growing up in the 70s and 80s, it was always that the Soviets wanted to divide us. The idea is, if you remember, you know, going back to, you know, the head of the Communist Party there would say, you know, America is going to eat itself. Eventually, we were going to turn on ourselves, and we would be our own worst enemy. And because we were divided, and it was mostly based on the race issue, as I remember back then. You know, I'm looking at it now, and we've never, as a country, in my view, outside of the Civil War, been this divided, this polarized. You know, at least not in my lifetime have we been as polarized as we are. And now it seems, you know, mission accomplished.
Yeah, I think of it as like a rubber band. So, you know, people kind of fought back against the fact that Obama was president, and that's what we come with Trump. But the rubber band with that, he comes up with these terrible conservative Pence-like issues that he wants to fight for, like banning trans in the military. All of this has a rubber band effect where it's like, oh, we're going to take your health care for you. So then instead of me saying, oh, well, we need to fix this and that state, I say we need to give health care to everybody. They take away women's rights. I'm like, everybody deserves it. You know, same thing happens with every different social issue, economic issue. So he's actually helping us in the long run by hurting us, as sad as it is. And that's what it takes. People have to sometimes lose what they had to realize how important it was to them. I don't see Obamacare, you know, burning down the country. I see, you know, white supremacists doing that still.
Yeah, I'm with you. And the hope is you're right. The hope is that with all this organizing and all these feet in the streets, we move forward in a positive direction. Scott, I appreciate the time. Always great talking with you. I look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks for having me on.
Good stuff. Our good friend Scott Dworkin. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
It's desperate times, so desperate measures we explore. Marching on the Capitol to lobby leaders for involvement. 3,000 people screaming out, where's our government? Lawsuits and arraignments, members under company surveillance. For respect, keep fighting for these rights for generations. It's next. One day longer.
Your working class radio experience, where hard work, common sense, and rational thought are a reality. The Rick Smith Show.
The world keeps telling me to get a grip or I won't last. Gotta break away from solitude and let go of my past. I've never found it easy to change my stubborn ways or to gain perspective, throw away those oldest days. We have struggled, we have prayed, we're still searching for something more. We have struggled, we still pray.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So, I go back to this Cambridge Analytica thing, and I had this conversation over the weekend where I got the, no one changed my vote. And I go, maybe not. Maybe you're a 5. And look, 1s and 5s don't decide elections. 3s decide elections. And I said, look, as a 5, you simply were the guy who, without thinking, mindlessly regurgitated whatever talking points the Russian trolls threw out, the Trump campaign threw out. You mindlessly sent on chain emails that were focus group tested and all full of BS. And you influenced the 3s. And look, I know all the 5s. They're, no, not me, Hillary for prison. But by continuing to throw those things out there, you helped the Russians influence those who, well, they're not on either side. And the reality is, in our country right now, and it's always been this way, there's about 5% of the population that defines every election. You have your pollers, you have your Democrats, and I'm going to vote for Republicans. You've got your team sport folks, and you get about 5% in the middle. And they're usually the most uninformed 5%. They're usually the ones who, he looks cute, or, he sent an email to us, or that's usually how it comes down. And this is what the Russians knew. They knew that if they kept hammering, and and this is what Cambridge Analytica knew, if they could target to places, well, that are already off the fringe, you could have a huge impact. And you look at the numbers for a very small amount of money, the numbers of people that they had access to is remarkable. And again, it comes back to Facebook did change how it did business, and that helped them. I mean, it more than tripled their ability to reach it. It seemed like all of a perfect storm. And the question for me is, how much of this did Facebook, find itself in the middle of? There's just so many questions, which is why, again, we absolutely, without question, need an investigation. That's simple. Gonna take a quick break. Right back with Hour 2. If you're listening on a station that only picks up Hour 1, head on over to thericksmithshow.com. For everyone else, right back. Stick around.
Controversial, thought-provoking, opinionated. Rick Smith.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
Your proud defender of the American dream, Rick Smith.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Getting a lot of email on this this question, the census coming up, citizenship question. Had a lot of people, going, it makes sense, and for some, it may actually make a bit of sense. I personally don't think that we should be throwing all this stuff in there. It's always been my view. It's supposedly just simply a head count on how we divide up federal funds. There's been a lot of questions over the years thrown in there. You go, why is that there? But here to explain some of that and explain why maybe this is a bad idea and maybe why some of the other stuff wasn't such a bad idea. I've asked Liz Kennedy to come talk with us. She's a senior fellow over at the Center for American Progress. Liz, thanks for taking time for us.
My pleasure, Rick.
So, I look at this and, there seems to be some folks who are saying, look, it's common sense. You should be a citizen, Liz. Only citizens should be counted.
Well, that is just 100% not the case. And in fact, the Constitution requires that every 10 years, every person living in the United States is counted through the census. Republican, Democratic administrations, even Secretary of Commerce Wilbur Ross himself have just confirmed unequivocally that the Constitution requires a count of all persons living in the United States, regardless of citizenship or legal status. And so the problem, Rick, is that in this current climate of really, fear and persecution of immigration communities, by adding this last-minute, untested question to this, core governmental undertaking, it's really screwing up the what is required by the Constitution to be a fair and accurate count of every person living in the country. If by adding this question, you're in fact making it just so much less likely that a whole host of people, citizens and non-citizens alike, will actually respond to the census, then what you've gone and done is screwed up the whole project. Because if you don't get a fair and accurate count of the census, then you're not going to be able to fairly and accurately allocate both the representation and all the resources that follow on from this basic constitutionally mandated count.
Right, but you're going to get the right wing, and I got to be honest, so many people have just flooded my box with, they're illegal, they shouldn't be here, they shouldn't be counted. This should only be for citizens, Liz. And that, look, this is the red meat that's being thrown out, and that's the reason, in my view, and you can disagree, it's my view, the reason that they've thrown this out is simply to froth up the base and also to drive people underground.
Yeah, it's really disappointing that, is a mild way of putting it, but you've already seen the Trump campaign fundraising off of this. And the point is, you're president of the United States. Your job is to do the best job of your, constitutionally mandated government function. That includes getting a fair and accurate census count of all the people living in the country. So again, it is absolutely the case that we've seen so much rising xenophobia, so much rising anti-immigrant, sentiment, and that has absolutely been, driven both by, anti-immigrant folks in the U.S. and then, of course, sown with division with Russian bots. And in fact, you may know this, that Secretary of State Chris Kobach in Kansas has taken credit for suggesting that the Trump administration add the citizenship question. He says that he mentioned it to Trump. And of course, Chris Kobach is known for his major anti-immigrant views, his show us your papers laws, his voter suppression laws that he's been in court just losing time after time to the ACLU on. And frankly, his past associations with people that are really white nationalists. So this is just kind of an importation of that anti-immigrant xenophobic agenda into what is, again, a core constitutionally mandated project that the government undertakes once every 10 years. It's one of the few things that the Constitution actually mentions and requires to be done.
Right.
And, censuses have been going back since, we mention in the Bible, right, all the time. But here it's and they go back to be counted. So it's here everyone in the country is supposed to be counted, and yet when you throw up this huge barrier that is just going to scare off, not just people who might not have documents to be here, but, anyone who kind of might be in their household, citizens. So you're not going to get a full count of citizens, and as a result, you're going to have skewed political representation, and you're going to really have a bunch of communities that are losing out on funding, and it's a real failure of the Trump administration, again, to carry out a core function of government under its leadership. Instead, we're seeing them throw a last-minute wrench in the works. For really, what's the reason? I think, as you identified, to just kind of throw, to further stir the pot of xenophobia and anti-immigrant feeling in this country, and that, again, is obviously an inappropriate thing for a president.
And not to mention the Machiavellian, gut your enemies in public, because, the states that would be harmed by this happen to be Democratic states, the ones that have sanctuary cities and all of this stuff in it. But you said a moment ago, and there was a lot in what you said. It used to be that the president does a job for all the country and for all the people. That was so 1 through 44. 45 forward. I'm hoping it stops at 45 and 46 picks up and says, hey, let's go back to the way it was. But it just seems now it's all about scoring Twitter points more than it's about actually governing and moving us forward as a nation.
Well, can I also just say it is absolutely not the case that the only areas that might be losing out here are, quote unquote, blue states or what have you. It's anywhere that the population has actually changed. And yet, if that population change doesn't show up through this census count, then those states and areas won't get more congressional seats. This is how we apportion which states get which number of seats in Congress every 10 years. And then they're also not going to get the kind of funding through the federal formulas that apportion something like $675 billion in federal funds. Ends up being directed through a variety of the programs through the formulas that are based on the census population count. So if you think about states, maybe Arizona, maybe Florida, again, people are now, I'm sure, going to be doing this research, but those don't jump out at you as blue states. And yet if they have high immigrant communities that, in fact, do not return the census forms because they are scared to report their immigration status to this administration, which I think people could understand why folks might be carrying around those fears when we see these ICE raids every other day, the videos on social media, et cetera. So, in fact, red states may very well be harmed through an inaccurate census count as well. And then, as you say, we really all will be, because we need a highly functioning government. And even while people like to attack the government, there are actually things that continue to work brilliantly. The census has not had this citizenship question since 1950. So this is really a 11th hour play. Everything else that it goes forward in the census, it's tested in the field. It's a very kind of expert-oriented, data-oriented system. And instead, they seem to be just kowtowing to playing up xenophobic and anti-immigrant fears rather than doing a good job. And
and as you've said, you're going to skew the results by having a large portion of the population not returning it. People who are here legally and in undocumented status as well, simply because I don't know that you want somebody coming knocking on your door.
That's correct. It's just, I heard some reporting, reporters have been out asking, looking into the potential consequences, kind of writing the first draft of history on this. And so they were asking people in immigrant communities if they would answer a census with this question, and every single person said no. So again, it is clearly the case that you are going to be getting inaccurate results. And this is one of the largest undertakings that the federal government is charged to do by our Constitution every 10 years, to count every person living in the U.S. And instead, the decision that the Trump administration has made here at the last minute, because the questions for the next census are due to Congress on April 1st. So this is just kind of a last-minute change, really, even though it's still several years before the census actually gets deployed. But it's bad for the census, it's bad for our communities, and it's bad for America.
Yeah, I mean, look, you've got to have this stuff well in advance done, because it's a massive undertaking. I was having this conversation earlier today about, because we were talking about this question in particular, and I was saying, this is an enormous undertaking. Imagine trying to count 310, 320 million people and getting an accurate count of where they are and all of that. I mean, it's a massive undertaking that you actually need to know what you're doing and have a plan to do it. It's just not something you say, tomorrow I think we're going to go count everybody.
Exactly. This isn't like a poll that you'll average the polls, that it's just something like somebody will do it one way, somebody will do it another. Like, the whole Census Bureau conducts careful, costly research and testing over a period of many years whenever they're going to even tweak a question to see how change would impact response rates. There's actually testing currently being done. My understanding there's something called end-to-end testing, but field testing being done in Providence, Rhode Island right now. So they're already like in the field with the census tool that doesn't contain the citizenship question, and instead, again, to kind of drive this administration's anti-immigrant, xenophobic agenda, and to be able to, I suppose, fundraise off it for the Trump campaign, they're willing to endanger the representation and resources that are due to every American, through these formulas and through apportioning the congressional seats. So it's just not in anybody's interest for this, unwise decision to be made. It's really this kind of politically driven question, and it's really compromising the Census Bureau's constitutional responsibility to do the fair and accurate count. So we're certainly hoping, I'm sure, lawsuits have already been filed. There is an opportunity for Congress to stop this question from being added. And so, the fight is far from over. People should definitely, contact their elected representatives about the need for a fair and accurate census. Congressman Cummings has called for hearings to be held as to how this decision, was made and what the impact of the decision will be. And there's, quite a bit of legislation that has been introduced, and more legislators who are intending to introduce legislation to block this question from being added here at the 11th hour. Because, again, it's completely unnecessary. There's no need for it. It hasn't been asked since 1950, and, we've been handling all of the kind of things that flow from this quite well.
Right.
So, and five, in case it's just not clear, 5 of the past census directors under both Republican and Democratic administrations have all said this is a horrible idea. So again, this isn't like Republicans think one thing, Democrats think another. Plenty of Republicans think that this is a horrible, horrible idea because it undermines the core purpose of the census.
Yeah, but Liz, that isn't for good governance. I think we have to stop thinking about this as a good governance kind of scenario. This is purely about feeding the rabid base. This is the talk radio crowd that we're feeding. The people who are the lock Hillary up people, the people who are going, we need to get a big bus and throw all of the illegals out. And that's who this is for. There wasn't any thought that went into this. I think Trump probably, it came to him in a dream, or Kobach whispered in his ear, or who knows, it was on a piece of paper and he read it. I don't think there was any real thought that went into this other than, hey, we'll do this.
Well, I'm hoping there is certainly a lot of thought going and action and energy going into how to reverse this, as you say, poorly thought out, if thought out at all, and certainly badly motivated, if motivated at all, decision to essentially intentionally screw up the census. But again, census is not something that a lot of people think about. We shouldn't really have to think about it. We should just answer it once every 10 years and go on our merry way. It's only when the government isn't doing a good job of just doing a fair and accurate count that people who aren't the rabid base that you're referring to, who understand that this isn't about immigration policy. That's just a completely separate thing.
Right.
This is about a fair and accurate count of every person in the country. So you can have whatever opinion you want to have about immigration policy that oughtn't to infect the census and prevent the government from doing its constitutionally mandated job of providing a fair and accurate count. And again, people will actually suffer from this. Republicans and Democrats will suffer if the census is screwed up, because the seats that are apportioned, how many states get how many seats in Congress, flows from how many people live in each state, not how many citizens live in each state. So that's really something that is, that could be skewed, which would have huge consequences.
Right.
And then federal resources, in terms of school spending and much other, hundreds of billions of dollars. So it's in everyone's interest, except people who are just so, I suppose, driven by their anti-immigrant, xenophobic, blinders on, that they don't recognize that, having a policy debate on immigration is one thing. This is a completely separate question about a fair and accurate census count, and you shouldn't be importing, strong feelings about one into then essentially undermining the whole purpose of fair and accurate.
Two last real quick questions. One being, what do you say to the person who says, you know what, it should be included because we want to know what percentage of the population is here in an undocumented fashion, which is an actual question. And then two, what should we be doing to make sure that our representatives and that this doesn't go forward?
Sure. So there are many different census tools, and again, this is a kind of technical thing that now some people know about. But the census itself conducts block level data. It's really supposed to count every single person living in the country. They then do supplementary, basically there's something called the American Community Survey. And so there they have had questions that go out to a much, much, much smaller statistical number with a much longer form of many, 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 many questions. And that helps inform other decisions when you do statistical sampling, when you get a lot more information. So there was a citizenship question so that you can get the data on how many people living here are citizens versus how many people, how many estimates would you make about the population of people that are living here that are undocumented. So there are tools to do that are not screwing up the constitutionally mandated decennial census. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing is that now is the time to contact your state and local elected officials, because this decision, again, will threaten an accurate count. And it's really state and local government leaders that also need accurate information to make decisions regarding, communities. Also businesses, by the way. Right. American businesses absolutely rely on correct data that is counted through the census. So this is, not helping the business community either. But it would be really terrific if state and local elected leaders could urge their congressional delegations to overturn this effort to undermine the census. So whether that's governors or state legislators or even local governments, it would be really terrific for people in Congress to move on saving the census and blocking the citizenship question. Again, there are bills already being considered. There'll be a few more pieces of legislation introduced. But yes, I think so that's really the thing is that we need, and local and elected officials will have a very strong voice with their congressional delegations on this. Again, it's not a red and blue question. It's, there are many states that are red or purple who may very well lose resources and lose representation as a result of a skewed census. So I thank you for the opportunity to ask folks to take action to save the census.
It's more of a green issue. It's more about the allocation of green. That's where we'll go. Liz, I appreciate the time. It was great talking with you. Thanks so much.
It's my pleasure. Have a good evening.
All right, fantastic. Liz Kennedy, she is the Senior Director of Democracy and Government Reform at the Center for American Progress. I screwed that up since she was a senior fellow. She's much better than that. I'm going to take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. Working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day the U.S. Supreme Court issued its ruling on the case West Coast Hotel versus Parrish. The ruling upheld a progressive-era Washington state law that established minimum wages for women. An example of protective legislation, it intended to guard health, safety, and morals of women workers. Elsie Parrish had been a chambermaid at the Cascadian Hotel in Wenatchee, Washington until 1935. She sued and won at the state level after she was paid far below the state's minimum wage. The parent company, West Coast Hotel, appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. They argued the progressive-era law violated the constitutional right of individuals to freely contract with one another. This interpretation was common during the court's Lochner era. The 1905 Lochner v. New York ruling against maximum hours for bakers ushered in a period of anti-labor Supreme Court rulings. Parrish is considered the landmark case that brought an end to that era. The court argued that the Constitution does not speak of freedom of contract and added, quote, the exploitation of a class of workers who are in an unequal position with respect to bargaining power is not only detrimental to their health and well-being, but casts a direct burden for their support upon the community. What these workers lose in wages, the taxpayers are called upon to pay. The case is also considered instrumental in the switch in time to save 9. It was a reference to Justice Owen Roberts' surprising shift in favor of Parrish. This occurred just as President Roosevelt finalized plans to increase the number of Supreme Court justices to 15. Though Parrish did not overturn Lochner, it did mark a period of pro-labor rulings. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, ricksmithshow.com. Lots going on, lots to talk about, lots to get to. Let's find out what's going on in Washington, D.C. and around the world. Bob Nate, Talk Media News. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick. Anytime.
So what's the big news what's the big story of the day? Is it John Kelly? Is it Stormy Daniels? Is it all the nonsense around there? What's the top story?
Well, there's all kinds of things. North Korea is technically the top story, and I've got some ideas on that. But to me, one of the bigger stories is the fact that people privately around Trump, not people within the White House, are trying to get him to get rid of Chief of Staff Kelly and communications people. You can do it on your own. You're important. You've got chaos. You've had all these people you have to deal with. Just get rid of all these people. Get rid of Kelly in particular. I find this fascinating. I have a theory that people, who want to have more influence with the president will want to isolate him by getting rid of a chief of staff. You have to have a chief of staff.
Yeah, but didn't Trump just float that not too long ago that I guess, Johnson and Carter didn't have chief of staffs for a little while?
Yeah, and they might not have, and it's a different era in the world, at that time. And, I mean, technically you don't have to have a chief of staff. But if you don't have a chief of staff, you've got people like John Bolton and others directly to the president, no buffer zone, no gatekeeper. Chiefs of staff are gatekeepers.
Yep.
No gatekeeper. Rahm Emanuel, tough as nails, and a lot of people don't like Rahm Emanuel within the Democratic Party, too. But let me tell you, he was a gatekeeper. Karl Rove, no more Machiavellian human being in American politics than Karl Rove, but he was the gatekeeper.
Yeah, I wasn't a big Rahm Emanuel fan myself, but you're right. Yeah. But you have to have that buffer or chaos. I think, at least I think. Well, here's the thing. I'm looking at this White House. I'm going, how much more chaotic can it possibly get?
It can.
Thanks for that.
It can. Without a chief of staff, I think it can.
I'm starting to think about what that would look like and just how bad that would be.
Well, you would have the higher level guys running in. I think it's probably sought by. Look, Rick, if you wanted to have influence, and you want to lobby, and you're friends of the president, et cetera, what better way to do that than to get the middleman out of the road?
Right.
And you go directly to the president. obviously these are outsiders. These are not people that are within the White House.
Yeah, I mean, well, we'll see how that plays out. I'm fully expecting Kelly to get fired because eventually everyone gets fired. It's just a matter of when.
You know, I used to always say that I wanted to work for Barack Obama because he really didn't fire anybody. But now I don't know. I think that you know, I'd rather work in a place where you really maybe have to really push it to get fired versus a place where you probably fire yourself.
I mean, it's just crazy how. And look, if you're going to fire me, look me in the eye and tell me I'm fired. Don't send out a tweet.
Right.
I mean, you know, this whole idea of you know, executive by Twitter is just, I don't know, it's just bizarre to me. Another person that I fully expect to get fired at some point is this Mad Dog Mattis. Evidently, he made a little news today, which not good getting your name in a headline.
You mean with the devil's incarnate?
Yeah, with Bolton.
Right. Bolton got out. I watched it. Bolton got out of the car. He must have been late. He kind of almost ran to meet Mattis. It was kind of interesting. And then Mattis shook his hand, and I think Bolton said, "I'm sorry for running late," or something. As they walked up the steps to go inside, you can hear Mattis very dryly saying, "So I've been told you're the devil incarnate." That's what he said. You know, which I really like Mattis now.
Yeah,
for saying that to John Bolton.
Yeah, I'm starting to think, yeah, maybe that's you know, maybe he's got some insight. But now that he's put himself on out there on the front page, somebody now knows his name. That means he's on the chopping block, in my view.
Yeah, true.
You can't steal Trump's thunder.
Well, this, you know, North Korea, speaking of thunder, the whole North Korea deal, nobody's going to tell me that this just happened this fast and that all these dominoes fell in place just instantly through karma. I think that there's a ton of behind-the-scenes communications, probably with South Korea, and South Korea went to North Korea. China is going to try to do some kind of deal on tariffs because they're lining this all up for President Trump. Because, you know, nobody can dispute the fact that if this does come about, it's an ace for Trump. Now, if he messes it up, it's really bad.
Right.
Because all the pieces are sitting there right now.
But do you think, because I've been looking at this and I've been going, you know, it just seems all too cozy and all too, you know, as you've said, too quick to have just happened. To me, the idea that I got this feeling the Chinese are behind this whole thing. They're the ones who were pushing on to rattle the sabers a little bit as a diversion to get us off of the trade stuff.
I completely agree. And I've been saying this all day on radio, that the Chinese, one, they don't want a bunch of problems in their backyard, so they don't want that. Two, the Chinese want to be able to still have somebody in power, and they knew eventually some kind of missile was going to go into Kim Jong-un's house, all right? I think they knew that. But the third thing is they are so manipulative, and they're going to try to trade the tariff by saying, look, we're giving you this, now we want that. That's what they're going to do.
Sure.
I've been saying that all day today. They want to trade on the tariffs because they don't want, you know, any problems on tariffs.
Because at the end of the day, I don't care what anyone says, they're smarter than he is.
Oh, they are very bright, very manipulative. They have manipulated our government for years.
Yep. And, you know, I look at someone like Trump who's going to walk right into this, you know, face first.
Sure.
And
the only person that can actually sabotage all of this, I think, is John Bolton.
So maybe John Bolton could be the savior.
Yeah.
Not the Antichrist after all.
I don't believe that Bolton was brought in because they really, really wanted to scare Kim Jong-un. I think Bolton was brought in because Dick Cheney and that crew pulled some strings and got him in there, you know. So I don't think that Bolton brings anything to the table. Now, I think he could sabotage this entire deal somehow, potentially, which would be a shame if he did that. So we'll see.
Well, see how this all plays out. If I were a betting man, I would still bet that China's behind it, and they're the ones who are going to walk away with all of the money and smiling.
Absolutely.
It just is what it is. The last couple of days, I've been watching Trump and Amazon and the stock going up and going down. And what's going on?
Well, this one I think he gets some sympathy for. Now, we all know why he's doing it. Bezos, the owner of Amazon, bought the Washington Post. Trump hates the Washington Post, so therefore he hates him. So he's lashing out. You don't pay enough taxes. You're not paying the states what their due is, and all that. Now, he gets some sympathy, even though this is all personal. He does get sympathy, though, because a lot of governors want something done. They want their share of the money. They're not getting it from Amazon wherever it's domiciled, right? Yeah, that's true. I think that a lot of people look at Amazon and realize it puts, mom and pop out of business every single day it's in operation. I know it employs people, but it puts a lot of other people out of business. So, if he's going after Amazon, it's like, it's not making a lot of people cry. But he's not going after it for the tax. He's going after it because Amazon bought the Washington Post, and he hates the Washington Post.
And that's it in a nutshell. It has nothing to do with the other stuff.
That's it.
But you're right. I've been saying
to do with anything else.
I've been saying for years that Bezos, is the, and Amazon, he's the billionaire with the greatest crime in history. Because look, behind every great billionaire, there's a great crime, and the great crime there was they didn't pay taxes, and they paid taxes to no one. Now they're saying they do in a couple of places, but we're so far behind on that game, it's almost over, and that's the thing that really upsets me.
I agree.
But here again, it's not about Amazon. It's about Trump's personal feelings,
right,
and all of that nonsense. What did you think of the firing of the VA head?
I was for it. I know what he's saying about the privatization. That's a very long, complicated process. I was on the Veterans Committee, Rick, but I think overall it's okay because the guy, he took some Wimbledon tickets and he did some travel things. I wasn't as alarmed about that as I was about the fact that, from what I understand from friends of mine on the Hill, and this was coming from both sides of the aisle, he was chaotic, controlling the staff, really not making the trains run, throwing everything off. So I don't think he'll be lost. Now I know Nancy Pelosi issued a press statement saying about this is what the Koch brothers wanted, but I think that the VA's been in disarray for quite a long time under several presidents now, and I don't think this will be that bad. Now I must also say I have been fascinated with Ronnie Jackson, the Rear Admiral, because he did that long I'm going to stay here till I answer your question press conference. I was really impressed how he handled it. I really was.
Really, now, honestly, truthfully, even though Trump could have lived to 200 and best jeans, and all that's the kind of guy you want running.
He got through it. I mean, I'm impressed. So he got through it. But here's the problem with him. He's never run anything, and that is a problem. And it's the VA, and it's huge. People just don't realize how massive the VA is, and he hasn't run anything. So
I think I saw something like 400,000 employees nationwide.
Oh, it's amazing. So if he does not bring in some top shelf people that know how to run that bureaucracy, handle it, control it, so the veteran services are there, it will be a nightmare. I don't care if he got through the press conference. It'll be a nightmare.
Yeah, but I keep talking to my friends at AFGE, and they're telling me, look, there are 50,000 job openings nationwide that aren't being filled, that they're just not filling, and you wonder why services are struggling. You wonder why getting appointments is difficult. They're having a hard time getting the government to allow them to hire people. And for me, this is I have friends who say we want government-run healthcare, and I go no, I don't know that I'm thrilled with that. Because what ends up happening is you have these political fights that go on, and you end up starving it. I'm all in favor of government paying the bill, all in favor of that, but I don't necessarily know that I want government doctors.
Mm-hmm. Right. You're looking at a single-payer system.
Yeah, I'm looking at there shouldn't be an insurance company paying the bill.
Right.
We should be able to do that without some pushing papers. That's not as difficult. But this idea that how we've set up the VA, and for me, that's one of those things that's made me go, maybe I don't want universal health care. Maybe I just want the single payer part of it. Leave the private sector to fight out how we do that, because there is some efficiency there. But to be honest, I'm looking at this going, it's these politicians who have just screwed this up.
Well, yeah, the VA is almost irreparable, and that's the problem with this. And I don't want to use the word privatized because it's a misnomer. But what we should do is realize you can't continue to make every VA center have all the care it needs to have, because there's not enough money, not enough people, and it's just not working. We promised these veterans health care, give them a waiver. If they can't get the health care in Pittsburgh that they need, then, go over to Philadelphia. I don't know. Let them have some options, or go to Cleveland or whatever, But that's not the way it runs, and it's a very messed up system.
Yeah, but, I also have some veteran friends who say, look, at the end of the day, there's institutional knowledge here, and this is why you need to have a government-run system, because, these people do focus on war injuries. These people do focus on war illnesses, and, the private sector has no ability to deal with this. And what my fear then becomes, if we do some of what you're saying, this light privatization to start, is that you end up creaming off the top. We end up paying a whole bunch of money for simple services that we could have funded.
That's true.
More economically in-house, and you end up destroying both systems.
Right.
That's my fear. And this whole thing, I mean, if we're going to spend unlimited tons of money to put them into combat, to screw them up, I think we should be spending a little bit more money to take care of them when they get home. And I know that sounds political, but it's just common sense.
Well, we made a commitment to them.
Yeah, and maybe next time we think twice before we go jumping into something. Just a thought.
Right.
Yes. Just kind of a thought.
Is a good thought. Right.
And finally, Eric Holder for president, really?
Oh, my. I'm going to run. Yeah. I don't even know why he said that. I added that to my news day. I just don't know why he said it.
Needs a job? Gonna raise some funds? Somebody's gonna donate?
Sure, but I don't know. Maybe he was bored. I'm not sure.
All right. That ought to be. You know what it will do? It will get the right wing all tingly in the panties.
All right. Exactly.
They're going to be thrilled. All right. Good stuff, Bob. Appreciate the time, man.
Okay, Rick. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good talking with you, Bob Ney, Talk Media News. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Today's corporate captains like to think of themselves not as mere business people, but as modern society's innovative geniuses. But innovation for what purpose? After all, some of society's most inventive minds are flim-flammers, Ponzi schemers, gamers, embezzlers, thieves. Sure enough, too much innovation coming out of corporate suites these days amounts to shameless schemes to dupe and rip off rank-and-file workers. The latest one is a hustle called gamification, an attempt by such giants as T-Mobile and Walt Disney to give game-like, quote, psychological prizes to employees, rather than giving pay raises or cash bonuses. As the honchos of United Airlines learned, however, not everyone bites the corporate bait. United recently announced a new fun game for employees. Rather than giving standard bonus payments this year, bosses were creating a dazzling sweepstakes lottery with such wow prizes as luxury cars and $100,000 in cash. But the sizzle quickly fizzled, as United's 90,000 workers realized that more than 99% of them would get zero. United had hoped the game would create, quote, excitement among the rank and file, but instead it created resentment. Workers, naturally preferring bonus cash to bogus corporate excitement, rebelled with such fury that United is now reconsidering the switch. That case aside, however, the corporate push to replace real pay with cheap psychic income is on the rise. More corporations are even hiring chief behavioral officers to analyze reams of personal data on employees to devise non-cash ways to motivate them. This is Jim Hightower saying, what we have here is the deterioration of executive ethics to the point that openly gaming and cheating America's workaday majority is considered fair play.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
So we're ticking down the days. Monday, I understand, is the big day in Oklahoma where teachers across that state are talking about hitting the picket lines in a giant walkout to kind of emulate what went on in West Virginia and in Oklahoma. I mean, it's kind of amazing to me that the legislature said, here's $6,000. Will that help? And the folks are saying, no, evidently, no, we want better than this. Now, it's not just about the money. It's about working conditions. It's about the conditions under which students learn. It's about, oh, hey, by the way, maybe having permanent teachers. Gee, there would be an interesting idea, attracting more qualified teachers, which is why I've asked Aaron Baker to come talk with us. He's an Oklahoma teacher, 8th grade history teacher, also one of the folks, I guess. We'll see what he's going to do on Monday. Aaron, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me on, Rick.
So am I getting this right? You guys are looking at a Monday walkout date?
Monday is certain. A lot of things are moment by moment here between the House and the Senate. They're passing it back and forth, and a lot of people have waffled a little bit, and some districts are saying, well, they're going to go back. And so Mondays for sure. And my district, we've got a supportive superintendent. We're looking at the week.
Oh, wow. Now, again, that's really the important part. I think the part in West Virginia that was really important was the superintendents who said, you know what, we're not going to deal with half the teachers or this or that. We're just going to shut it down until we figure this out, which I think was an important part of that victory.
Absolutely, absolutely. The superintendents are polling the teachers, and when the poll comes back that the teachers aren't going to be there, then there's not going to be any school. That's simple.
Now, from my perspective, the superintendents, I would think that they would want the teachers to do well so that more funding comes into the schools so that it's easier to operate. So it just seems like there's a natural interest right there.
That's absolutely right. There's a coalition between teachers union and the administrators. We've got a common enemy in this. A superintendent might be a boss on a normal basis, but the real dirty work here is the legislators.
Yeah, I mean, because you come back to it, I've had conversations with teachers all over the country who have told the stories of, look, all of these years of defunding, these years of taking money from schools, and it falls down onto the teachers who end up working for poverty wages in some cases, end up taking money out of their pockets to pay for supplies, and a lot of teachers leaving, so you end up with maybe not the best qualified people in the classroom. It just seems like now is that kind of boiling point where you guys as teachers have said, you know what, the heck with it, we've had enough.
You're absolutely right, and it's fascinating to see it happen in a deeply red state, a right-to-work state. We actually, we're called the Oklahoma Education Association because union is a bad word around here, and we don't have any sort of pay-in on non-members, but we still do negotiate pretty wide-reaching around the state. And so it's a fascinating thing to see people mobilized that have been conditioned to not like collective action.
No, you're absolutely right. But here's the thing, and this is where you guys as teachers, and we're seeing this all across the country. And I was saying this at the beginning of the West Virginia strike, that this is the greatest civics lesson that you can give your students. Standing up, standing together, and fighting for not just yourselves, not just higher wages and better benefits for yourself, but better opportunities for them is in my view the best civics lesson, the best class you could give.
You're absolutely right. We're 10 years no raise, and what we'd like to see in terms of funding, and that's really what our message is now, because the House came out with a pay raise on Monday night, and the Senate has they've played around with it a little bit, but they're trying to throw us a bone on the pay raises, but they have not even come close to what we're asking for the funding for the formula, because if we could just get back to 2008, where we were with funding in 2008, we would be in a pretty good position. And so we're not going to back down. We're going to walk until what we've said, and that's what's interesting too, is that people have said, well, we'll work with us here. It's like, well, you've had your time, and we've been at the negotiating table before with legislation, but when the groundswell happened, the Education Association put forth demands, and they haven't been met. And the time for negotiation is over when you put that out and say we're going to walk unless, then that's what's going to happen. We're going to walk until those demands are met.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, you had a decade to make this right, and all they did was, and it's not just Oklahoma, it's states all across the country who have defunded public education, and you end up with scenarios where. And I've had, these conversations, well, like I said, with teachers all across the country who say, we've got emergency temporary teachers in a bunch of classes, that we should have, good quality teachers who left to go do something else or left to go to another state because wages and benefits were better. It just seems like the legislature is, that old saying of, pound wise, penny foolish. It just seems like that right in front of us.
Absolutely, we've got the emergency certification class, and just like you said, it's through the roof since we've had such an exodus of teachers into neighboring states, and they're great people, and
sure they're great people, but
what's happening in Oklahoma is we're continuing to excel under continuing demise. It's just like it keeps laying on and piling on and piling on, but we continue to educate students to the very best of our ability. But yeah, we need the funding there so we can attract students, so we can have teachers who are professionally trained.
At the end of this, you look at where did all the money go? I mean, you said you wanted to get back to 2008 levels. You had the money in 2008. Over the last decade, where did those resources end up?
Yeah, there was a piece a couple of weeks ago. I can't remember who put this out, but something about Oklahoma. There are states who want to mimic Oklahoma the last 10 years or so because it's been an exercise in extremely small government. We've got a 75% threshold for any revenue-raising measures, and that's unparalleled anywhere in the country as far as I understand. And so when that happened Monday night, it just takes an act of God because something like 15 people in the House vote against something and it's gone. So we've got people, and this is happening everywhere too. We've got people in the GOP that they brazenly talk about they don't support public education, and they may not use those exact words, but their support for education reform, their support for voucher systems really lets us know where their allegiances lie, and so they're just a no every time on anything related to just providing a free education to all of our students.
So basically what you're saying is they're creating a crisis so they can privatize public education because they've destroyed it, and someone's got to come in and clean it up, and then they'll throw a bunch of money at it, right?
There you go. Defund it, over-regulate it, throw in the standardized test. We've got an A through F grading system that puts a label on all of our schools, which is it's a measure of poverty. And then at the back end, like you said, is criticize and say our system is failing. We got to come up with something new. Let's send our kids to the private schools with this money.
It's amazing stuff. And in the process, what you don't have is the specialization that you need. I mean, you look at all of the things. If you're staffing classrooms with emergency teachers, are you getting reading specialists? Are you getting language specialists? Are you getting librarians? Are you getting people who this is their life's work? Are you getting people who identify with the people that they're teaching? I mean, I read all of these studies that, minorities do better when they have minority teachers standing in front of the classroom. If you're barely able to hold on to the teachers you have and bring in some emergency folks, you don't have the ability to go out and bring in the kind of professionals that you need.
That's absolutely right. And so, I think funding and a living wage is step one. And there's about 15, 20 more steps, and somewhere along the way you get toward aggressive recruitment of teachers of color and just high levels of training and cultural competency for white teachers. And for me, I'm not unique. I saw a statistic, something about in California, the percentage of white teachers is roughly the same as the percentage of students of color. And so it's kind of a staggering statistic. So when you look at it, you realize that, sure, you've got white teachers who teach in predominantly white schools, but my situation is it's neither urban, where it's predominantly like high percentages of black and brown, but it's also not suburban and mostly white. We're lower middle class. Kind of in between those two, and that's where you see a high percentage of white teachers with a diverse classroom, but still white students are in the minority. And so one of the things I'm trying to do is to just get white teachers to think about their whiteness and to take that into the classroom with them.
I'm trying to think of how that works. Explain a little bit.
Okay, so, sometimes what you hear from some white teachers is you rarely hear anymore people say, well, I'm colorblind. Like, I want to pretend like everyone's the same.
Right.
People don't say that. What they say is, I treat everyone the same, or I have high expectations for all. And these things, they sound really good, but at the end or underlying these statements is this idea that they're not accounting for race. They're not thinking critically about race in the classroom. And so if someone says, and you hear this all the time, someone says, regardless of race. Well, it's like, we need to regard race. Even though it's a social construct, it's something that is very real in our culture, and we bring those constructs into our classroom as teachers, and students bring those identities with them. And so, if we're going for equity, if we're trying to raise students up who have been disproportionately disciplined, who have not been given the same opportunities as their peers in other schools or even in the same school, then so white teachers have to go in with that mentality, not with, it really is a sense of going into school every day and saying, you know what, I'm not going to treat my students all the same. I'm going to think about these critical issues that these identities that we bring with us, and we're going to work together. We're going to create this culture together.
And funding would help that.
Like I said, that's a start. But the DeVosses of the world, they don't know. They truly don't know what happens in the school, and I think you were hinting on this as well. You really have to be inside to see the miracles that happen. And I don't want to use that word lightly, but I said one time that 4 teenagers walk into a Target and their loss prevention department just loses their mind. But schools deal with teenagers in mass numbers every day. Like that's a thing that no one else wants to do. And when students go to school and they're safe and they go home, and they've learned something along the way. It's truly a miraculous thing, and it takes everyone at the very top of their game every single day. I've been in, this is kind of a second career for me, and so the things that I bring to school every day, things I bring into the classroom, they're the very best that I can imagine in any profession in terms of professionalism and preparation.
No, I mean, at the end of the day, you're talking about the future of this country. I mean, you say what you want. They are the next leaders. They are the next, construction workers. They are the next doctors and lawyers and, your street sweepers. They're the future. And if you don't invest, and it's always amazing to me that, we don't want to seem to invest in them now, but we complain about when you have to send people to prison. I mean, it just seems really backwards in my view. I mean, if we spent the amount of money that we spend on war and on prison, on actually educating and giving kids, opportunities, I don't know that we'd have the problems we have.
Absolutely. I mean, public schools are like roads. Everybody uses them, whether they're, whether they've got kids directly in one or not. Everyone's connected to a public school in one way or another. It's a big thing, and those who pretend like they can avoid it, or they don't need it, or they're going to retract from this, are really kind of fooling themselves.
Yeah.
And they're benefiting from the work that the rest of us are doing.
Yeah, as the bumper sticker I saw the other day said, if you can read this, thank a teacher. And thank you for the work that you guys do. And I wish you nothing but the best on Monday going forward. And I know it's going to be, you're fighting the righteous fight. You're fighting the good fight. And I'd love to have you come back again and tell us how everything turns out and how things go.
Thanks, Rick, so much. Appreciate
Good stuff. Appreciate it, Aaron. Good stuff. Aaron Baker, Oklahoma school teacher. And again, what's going to happen on Monday? I think we all know. You're going to see this sign of solidarity, and like I said, the best kind of civics lesson that you could possibly give to students. Seeing in front of them, in real time, in live action, civil disobedience, organized with a purpose, with a cause, redress of our government. I mean, all of those things. Just amazing stuff. Good on you, Aaron. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go, wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. See you back here tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith